Assalamualaikum, a very good day. Welcome to the world of educational assessments and welcome to assessment literacy and performance competencies. And for this particular week, we are going to look at several issues that have affected educational assessments. And just by looking at the wallpaper that I have, you would probably have guessed that we are going to explore issues that are related to COVID 19. And you got it right. We are going to look at classroom assessments during pandemic. Now, I don't really believe that issues should be taught. Um, to me, the best way to uncover issue is by having discussions and explorations of these issues together. But given the fact that we are having offline lesson this week, so we are just going to go over three different issues. And of course, you will also be carrying out an assignment on one of these issues. So that would provide you with the opportunity to explore these issues further. So we're going to look at how we have shifted our classroom assessments from traditional means to an online means, as well as high stakes assessment and the two-tier grading systems or pass or fail grading system. Now, can you think of how COVID 19 has affected your lives? It does not only affect our lives at personal level, it has affected every single fiber in this world. For the past almost 2 years now, teaching and learning processes have been shifted online. At some point, education systems were halted and temporarily shut down because we did not know what to do. We were not prepared. So, what COVID 19 did was accelerating our pathway to future. We were ready to go ahead. We were ready with online learning. We were already on the path to doing blended learning, e learning, distance learning. And we have all these approaches that somehow geared us towards the future. But when COVID 19 hit us, we realized that we were not that ready. Um, so, despite the fact that our readiness was somewhat questionable, life had to move on. Education had to be delivered, and interactions between teacher and students have to continue. So, when teaching and learning processes shift to online and virtual means, the traditional sense of classroom assessments were no longer relevant. We needed to make modifications to classroom assessments in order to accommodate this new way of teaching and learning processes. So basically, these three issues, oh my God, it's raining cats and dogs out there. I have thunderstorm and lightning. So I hope that this does not affect the audio quality. Okay, let's continue. I have forgotten where did I stop. Okay, all right. When COVID 19 first hit us, 1.58 billion students worldwide. It differs between one statistic to another depending on the duration of time. Here, produced by UNESCO, is 1.38 billion, but I mean, like there were also sources that says 1.58 billion students from 118 countries were out of classrooms due to school closure. All right. And for a little while, teaching and learning were halted. Nothing was done. We stopped. We did not know how to move on. And because at that particular time, our health and safety were even more important. Okay. We're thinking of the SOPs, what to do, how to deal with this new threat and whatnot. But after a while, teaching and learning processes resume, all right? But these continuations of teaching and learning processes were carried out virtually and online, right? So one must wonder how effective is this online learning? Despite the issue of learning loss, I very much love it. If you could read a bit about learning loss, it is also a very interesting subject and aspect to uncover with regard to pandemic. But I'm not delving into that particular topic or learning loss because it's more into teaching and not so much of assessments. But if you do have the time, read about it. All right, learning loss because of pandemic. A lot of studies have been done to examine learning loss, and I'm like, what happened to learning when students were out of school? Okay. Anyhow, let's move on and look at this. Now, according to studies, um, online learning has its own advantages. Students are able to retain more information when they learn online than learning traditionally. All right. And why is that? Because online learning requires lesser time to learn. Students can flexibly decide on the way that they want to approach their learning. They can go back and forth, reread and re-understand certain things. They can skip, they can move on because informations and documentations of learning are provided. So it is much easier for students to learn. Despite the fact that students are able to retain more information, okay, um, the effectiveness of online learning varies between one country to another due to so many factors, particularly not only just digital divide. I'm not going to explain what digital divide is. You can look the term up. And also because provisions of technology by the authority, access to internet and technology that every home has, as well as the economic and sociological factors. So different countries have different exposure and different challenges to online learning. For example, between underdeveloped nations, developing, and developed nations, there are significant differences in the success and effectiveness to online learning as well as e-assessment. Okay. And of course, as I mentioned, different countries have different coping strategies on how to continue with their teaching and learning processes. For countries such as Switzerland, Norway, and Austria, almost every home has a computer facility for students to work with and have access to learning. However, it is not the same to other countries. So it's really much different. Okay. And what would be the challenges to students when it comes to online learning? Interestingly, because school students these days, they are digital natives. They were born with all this knowledge of how to use gadgets and devices. So technological literacy and competency are not a problem. As compared to me, I'm not the digital natives. I am digital immigrant because when I was born, there was no technology that we know these days. It was very much different. So I have to learn new things as I grow up, and this is very much different than the digital natives than you guys are. So learning online is not something that is really different than what you are doing on daily basis because you are indulging yourself in technology anyhow. But to me, to teachers, when we want to migrate from traditional classrooms to online classroom, it requires such a heavy mindset shift as well as very much huge level of preparation that teachers need to do in terms of getting themselves equipped knowledge wise and skill wise to teach using online means. All right. So what students greatest challenge according to studies, the greatest challenge that students encounter very much related to the learning environment when they have to study at home. I mean, like you guys can also envision or imagine how your lives were before and now that we are during pandemic threat. Okay. It is not easy to study at home, not just because of disciplinary issue or time management issue, but because there are so many variables at home that will pull you away from being able to study effectively. And I'm not going to explore this particular issue further. So, of course, this impacts negatively on the quality of learning experience as well as students' mental health. If you were to attend schooling, you will have dedicated at least 7 hours of your life in school. Even if you are tired, there is opportunity for you to learn. But when you are at home, even though you have dedicated your life, for example, okay, today from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm just going to sit down here and study. But there are a lot of things that will pull you away and somehow affect this quality time that you have devoted yourself to study. All right, so let's continue. So because of teaching and learning have been shifted online, hence traditional assessment is no longer relevant. Teachers need to change the way they assess because their teaching and learning have been carried out differently. So this has brought forward the rise of e-assessment. And it is not just simply a matter of doing assessment online. There are a lot of considerations that teachers need to make in order to ensure that their assessment is valid, reliable, and trustworthy. These are three most important aspects of assessment that are deeply affected when teachers change their assessment from physical to online. Okay, so the simplest and the easiest example that I could give you here would be online tests. We used to have traditional tests, which enabled me to do proctoring and ensure that students were not cheating. I will be moving around. I will look at the quality of the test administration that I have, and so on and so forth. However, when I shift my tests from traditional to virtual means, I can no longer proctor my tests in the same sense that I did with traditional tests. And you, as the candidates or the test takers, you have this wonderful access to all these wondrous things on the World Wide Web, and I can't control you. Of course, there are platforms and apps that would have allowed me to do my e-proctoring, okay? But using all these apps, for example, would incur more use of data on the test takers. And if I were to get you to go out too much of your comfort zone when you are doing assessment, this could hype up your test anxiety, which would have negative impact on the test takers anyway. So despite the fact that technology has provided us with the means to sort of like monitoring the quality of our assessments, but there are also things that we have to consider as teachers that prevent us from using this technology. All right. So with online tests, I have to make sure that my questions would back answers that you cannot plagiarize or copy and paste from the internet. Because otherwise, if I were to ask questions in which the answers could easily be found, you could just copy paste the answers from the internet, even though you don't want to do that. But it's too much of the temptation. I mean, like, the answers are there. You just have to copy paste the questions and you get the answers right away, for example. And why would you not do that? So as a task developer, one of my challenges would be to come up with online test questions that prevent you, or questions that you cannot get the answer from the internet. But that will increase the level of difficulty of my online tests. All right. But even then, I have no guarantee or assurance that you will not be looking for the answer elsewhere. So this has hyped up the issue of validity, reliability of the responses provided by students, as well as the trustworthiness of the answers or responses provided by you. Okay, and this is just online assessment. We are not talking about other assessments as well. Remember that when teachers teach, the curriculum indulge in learning across 3 different domains. We have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. And cognitive domain is not that difficult to assess, right? However, teachers really struggle to teach online aspects or content that are related to affective domain. And similarly, assessments of affective domain has become so much difficult. Things that you are able to see physically now is transmitted online, and online means sometimes restrict us from doing observation that would have allowed us to observe and see how well students have acquired values or certain affective attributes, for example. Similarly, with teaching and assessment of psychomotor domain, just imagine how will you teach swimming when you are doing it online. Of course, you can show videos of different stages of swimming from novice to beginner to advanced, but it is not the same as having students in front of you where you can really assist them physically on the acquisitions of these skills. So even assessment has also become more difficult when it comes to psychomotor domain. All right. Right. We are done with the rise of e-assessment. Of course, it is not without challenge. If we do have the time, maybe we can spend a bit of time at the end of this semester going through or have a discussion of the solutions that we can have in the teaching as well as in the assessments of aspects that are related to cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domain. Now, we are moving on to the second issue, which is alternative grading during the pandemic. It is very interesting that many American universities have decided to move their scoring from the traditional grading systems to a system known as two-tier grading systems, pass or fail, or credit or no credit. And these dichotomous grading systems, this two-tier grading system, okay, have been adopted by many universities. First in America, and in Malaysia, UUM is the first university to follow suit. So, what exactly is a pass-fail grading system? Pass and fail. Why am I stuttering? Now, pass and fail grading systems. Forget about CGPA. Forget about A, B, C, D, E, F. All right. So in pass and fail grading systems, you would either be given a pass or a fail. Only 2 grades are available, and there is no third grade. So there is no A, B, C, D, E. If you have submitted all your assignments and your work enable you to somehow qualify the minimum standards of passing, then you will get a pass. However, if you do not submit any of the assignments, then you will get a fail. That is basically what pass-fail grading system is about. However, its implementations has been carried out with a lot of variations. All right. So some universities in the United States, they don't assign fail. What they do is, if students submit their work, then these students will be given a pass. And if they don't submit their work, they will be put on hold, and the pass will be given after work is finally submitted. So there is no room of failing or room for failing. What you have is the option to pass. And we wait as a university administrator, we will wait until you submit your work. Then we will get you to pass any particular course. All right. So why do American universities are doing this? because of digital divide, as well as because of access to technology. Now, when universities had to close down because of the pandemic, you would have imagined America being a developed country. Its citizens will have access to technology and they wouldn't have any problems using internet, so on and so forth. But this is a far cry from reality. A lot of households in America, particularly disadvantaged groups such as the Hispanic students who are with low social income, they did not have enough equipment and facilities to learn online, and also they did not have access to internet to get them to be able to study effectively. And of course, add in the challenges of COVID-19, with students having to deal with the passing of family members due to the COVID-19 infections, and students who had to work to support their living. They did not have time to study because their working hours has conflicted their learning hours, for example. So university administrators were very compassionate and considerate, and taking all these factors into account, they adopted the pass and fail grading system. All right. And these are several reasons why the pass and fail grading systems are adopted. One is to lessen students' anxiety. Remember that number one challenge that students have with when it comes to online learning is learning in home environment. So by introducing these systems, it doesn't put pressure for students to really do excellently. They just need to submit their assignments and get a pass. All right. And of course, with the reason I've mentioned just now, due to remote learning and access to technology, not everybody have the means to use internet or have access to internet, and this will somehow halt their learning progress. And because of socio-economic backgrounds and disadvantaged groups of students and living challenges during pandemic. Right. It does sound wonderful. I mean, like, who doesn't like the idea of getting a pass? And it sounds so easy. However, when university administrators in the United States introduced these particular grading systems, not many people were happy about it. All right. In fact, a lot of protests were carried out on the streets with stakeholders expressing their dissatisfactions with this system. Why do you think students were not happy with these systems? There are various reasons as to this. Because if you are high ability students, then your work and your excellence are not being recognized by this particular grading system. You are now no longer getting an A or excellent work or good grades, but the pass that you have somehow group you in the same group with students of medium ability, for example. So excellent students are not happy because their hard work and their excellence are not being recognized. Secondly, if you are only given a pass with no grades, no A, B, or C, not even A or A minus, these systems over time does promote low quality submissions, because students will only be doing bare minimum just to get a pass. They don't have to do excellently well, because even when they do, nothing will come out of it. All right. Uh, the third issue is because of scholarships and transfer credit. Um, Students who are receiving scholarships have to make sure that they're able to maintain certain grades in order for the scholarship to be reinstated the upcoming semester. But when a university grant only pass or fail, and this difference in the grading systems does not fulfill the requirements for their scholarship, and this has upset scholarship holders as well as transfer credit. When pass and fail is implemented, it does not align with the grading systems or the CGPA grading system, for example. So this makes the process of transfer credit difficult. And for students who want to further their studies in much higher level, for example, from bachelor degree to master's degree, after they have completed their studies, the pass and fail grading systems contradict the requirements that students need to fulfill in order to further their studies. So given all these issues, students and parents are not happy with this pass and fail grading system. But university administrators in the United States were adamant to continue with this system because they feel like these systems will be able to help the disadvantaged groups of students. All right, so we have covered two issues in one go without stopping for a break. All right, so let's move on to the final issue, which is high stakes assessment. Now, this is not classroom assessments. High stakes assessments are standardized large scale assessment, but it is still within the realm of educational assessment. And in fact, your first assignment for this course is related to this one particular issue. All right, so let's see what this issue is really about. What exactly is high stake assessment? Every country would have at least one high stake assessment, and this assessment produces results that impact significantly on the lives of the candidates or the test takers. And this would be in the sense of end of key levels. It determines candidates' competency and levels of achievement, the school leaving certifications. The same results would be used for university entrance and as well as for job applicants. So given the significance of this high stakes assessment, that is why it's called high stakes. Okay, the risk is too high, the stakes is high. And in Malaysia, can you think of an example of high stakes assessment? We have a number of assessments that are high stakes, but I guess in the sense that we are discussing about this issue, it should be SPM or CJ Pelajaran Malaysia. So that is one of the most high stake assessment that we have in our country. All right. So what exactly is high stakes assessment? They are usually large scale assessment. These assessments are carried out nationwide and they are standardized. All right. And they serve as a basis of major decision making for the stakeholders and not necessarily the students. These involve the Ministry of Education, the schools, the Department of Education at district levels and state levels, because a lot of decisions, particularly when it comes to funding, come out of the school's performance on these high stakes assessments. All right. So I have the information there. So I will leave the link to download these slides in the description box in my YouTube channel. All right. So when pandemic hits us, okay, most of the countries decided to delay their high stakes assessment. Just imagine SPM. What happened to SPM when the pandemic first hit us in March 2020? All right. We did not know how long will this pandemic last. Will we be able to get out of it? Would everyone be cured? Will we be able to vanquish this pandemic and then just live our lives just the way we used to live it, for example? We had no idea during that time. So the decisions to delay was primarily done because we felt that this pandemic will be over and we will be able to resume our lives as normal. But it didn't. It continued up until now. All right, so different countries have different coping strategies on how they deal with the pandemic threat with regard to high stakes assessment. Okay, this involves special arrangement. Some countries even opted to cancel altogether the high stakes assessment. Some countries postponed the high-stake assessment. I do have some examples here. Countries such as Thailand, New Zealand, some countries in the Arab region, as well as Brazil. The list is long, actually. These are just some of the countries. Decided to continue with the high stakes assessment, but with more strengthened precautionary measures and tighten up of the SOPs. And ours, Malaysia, including our neighboring countries such as Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines, we have decided to postpone the examination. But some countries even go to the extremes of using alternative approaches. We'll talk about it just after this. And some countries cancel the exam, but interestingly, there are also countries that have made the decisions to shift their high stakes assessment to online means of examination, all right, such as Cambodia, Myanmar, Pakistan, and you can see here Egypt, Mexico, Belgium, so on and so forth. Okay, some countries even decided to reduce the content assessed in their examinations. These include Italy, Japan, Vietnam, Ecuador. All right. So whatever the decisions are to maintain, to postpone, to cancel, and whatnot, you have to remember that assessments will incur psychological effect. Okay, changes that are done to assessments, particularly high stake assessment, will somehow lead to psychological burden on the parts of the candidates. Just imagine how just imagine the feeling of our SPM candidates last year because they were ready to sit for the SPM. They have been working towards it for the past 5 years, for example. And now, because of the pandemic, things were not certain and they had to wait. It is not as easy as it sounds, yeah? Especially when a lot of decisions must come out of this assessment. If SPM is delayed, university entrance will also be delayed, and you are not getting any younger. Every time passes, you are going to get older, for example. So, how long can we afford to wait? So, all these things would put on or add on anxiety. Okay, right. So, let's just continue. Um, well, I have some of more information about these the decisions made by countries in this slide. So let's just move on. It is also interesting to note. It is also interesting to note. I keep on eating my tongue. Okay, it is so interesting to note that some countries, such as Hong Kong and the United Kingdom, have decided to replace their high stakes assessment and use other means of assessment as an alternative. Okay. For example, Hong Kong and UK opted for teacher assessment grades to replace their high stakes assessment. In the UK, one of the high stakes assessment is the GCSE, or the General Certificates of Secondary Education. And this GCSE is sort of like equivalent to SPM. Okay. And because of the pandemic, the Ofqual, that is the body or the organization that is accountable to oversee and implement GCSE, Ofqual has decided to not have GCSE examination, but use teacher grades instead. So all the classroom assessment that teachers have been doing prior to the pandemic, these grades from this assessment will be used in replacement of SPM examination, for example. Now, do you think that all these grades and the scores that teachers have assigned from formative assessments, remember your formative and summative here, guys. What is formative assessments? Formative assessments are carried out while teaching and learning are ongoing, and the focus is on learning progress. Now, high stakes assessments or summative assessment, they are carried out at the end of a particular teaching and learning period, and the goal is to gather evidence that would indicate achievement. So we have GCSE or SPM equivalent, a form of summative assessment that would have captured the learning for the past 5 years. But because of pandemic, Ofqual has decided to not have GCSE examinations, but use teacher assessment grades instead. Okay, if you were to look and analyze the compatibility between these assessments, on one hand, we have high stakes assessment, SPM, that should look at your overall achievement. On the other hand, we have teacher assessments, formative assessments that are carried out while teaching and learning are ongoing. They do not provide data that indicates achievement. They do provide evidence or data that reflect progress. These two assessments provide scores that are compatible, that up to the point that they can replace each other. Okay, now you have to think of that when you do this assignment for article review as well. It's one of the most important considerations. Are they compatible? Are they exchangeable? Can they replace one another? Are they accurate to replace one another? Okay, so because of teacher assessment grades will be used or may have been used to replace GCSE scores, parents and students are really not happy with Ofqual's decision. Okay, why are they not happy? Because they believe that teachers are not capable of being objective. There is no way that teachers' assessment grades will be able to reflect accurately the grades that students would have gotten if they were to sit for the GCSE examination. That's number one. Secondly, because they are not sure or convinced that teachers will not be biased when they give grades to their students. Teachers may not have good knowledge of familiarity with all their students. So they may only know students who they may only know and become very well familiar with students that are high ability or low ability, the two extremes. These are students who usually get more attention in class. But teachers may not have good knowledge or good familiarity with students of middle ability group. Okay, so there's a lot of potentials and room for biasness, and this has caused concerns and worry on the parts of the stakeholders when Ofqual decided to use teacher assessment grades. Now, what do you think? If SPM results were not used, let's not have SPM this upcoming March next year. Let's just use teacher assessment grades that students have been sitting on and doing this assignment all this while. Do you think that these two different assessments are parallel in such a way that we can just cancel one and use another? What do you think? So this is the kind of critical thinking that I'm expecting to see when you submit your article review assignment. Okay? So what will happen to the future? Post-pandemic, what will happen to classroom teaching and learning? And what will happen to assessment? Will we continue to use online platform to use and do our assessments? Most probably. Well, only the future will tell, but we are on the path of, well, we are already using online assessments. Even after the pandemic, it is probably highly likely to stay. Even if schools were reopened and we go back to schools, we are now, I mean, like this is the second day that primary schools have reopened and students are going back to schools in batches, okay, in groups. But even when schools reopened, teaching and learning or some parts of it will still be continue to be carried out online. So if that is the case for the teaching and learning, so that will also be probably the case for online assessments as well. But of course, this is a very interesting topic for us to debate on if we do have the time. Why not? All right. So these are the references that I have used in the course of coming up with the slides. And of course, in our assignment one, the article review, we are going to explore one article. And this article, I'm not going to show the article here. There's a video, explanation video, which I have already uploaded about the assignment with the explanations on the article as well. So you can go and watch that particular video. That would help you to have better understanding before you proceed doing your article review. Anyhow, looking forward to your responses and your critical thinking for the article review. I hope that the three issues that we have covered very briefly in this particular video would have heightened your understanding of how the pandemic has affected classroom assessments. Okay, guys, that will be all for now. Till then, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you when I see you. Take care because I care. Bye.